Hi everyone, and welcome to the Replenish Earth speaker series, where we explore climate action through innovative and exciting speakers. Today marks the penultimate day of the London Climate Action Week, where we drive the national and international climate policy response, prioritizing green recovery. I'm Tia Kansara, and we'll be exploring how service design contributes to climate action. We'll be interviewing the Royal College of Art Head of Service Design, CLIVE GRINYER. The establishment of the Royal College of Art is the world's oldest art and design university in continuous operation, with alumni like Henry Moore, David Hockney, Bridget Riley, Sir Peter Blake, James Dyson, film directors like Tony and Ridley Scott, prominent members of the suffragette movement like Sylvia Pankhurst. I mean, wow. Clive GRINYER is the head of service design at the Royal College of Art in London, and his career includes a number of senior leadership roles, including the director of service design at Barclays Bank, where he built a service design team combining customer insight, agile design methodology to transform customer experience and develop new services. At the technology company Cisco, Clive led innovation projects for their major customers in financial services, retail, and public services. He set up the European Design Office for Samsung, has also led award-winning design teams for Orange, innovation consultancy IDEO in the US, and was the founder of the design consultancy Tangerine, along with Apple design chief Sir Johnny Ive. He works with public sector bodies, including Policy Lab in the UK Government Cabinet Office, Nesta, Innovate UK. Please invite Clive. Welcome to Replenish Earth Live.
Hello, thank you. I'm very honoured to be invited to speak. Thank you very much.
And it's such an interesting conversation that we're going to have, because we've sort of delved into so many of the different facets of service design, and often we're touched by service design without realizing that this is part of our lives. It's the experience that underlies so much of the activities and the culture and the arts in our lives. So please tell us, tell us and share with us a little bit of the work that you're up to right now.
I'd love to. I've got some slides prepared, and I'm going to give you a little bit of a history of design and service design and show you some examples. And I'm going to show you some examples from the students at the Royal College of Art. I'm very proud to be head of the course here. I've been in post for just a year, but I've been involved in the course since it started only 8 years ago, but already it's produced cohort after cohort of fabulous designers. So let me take you through some slides for the next 30 or 40 minutes. So thank you for that introduction, by the way, and explaining the incredible heritage of the Royal College of Art in Kensington, right next to the Albert Hall. Here's a picture of my first day last September. And when I joined as head of course, you get a feel for the diversity of people who come on the course in every meaning of that word. We have people from digital design, people from architecture, we have people from management consultancies, from social enterprises, from psychology, from mathematicians, an incredibly diverse range of people who have heard about this thing, service design, that is sort of taking over the world right now. And it's already in 8 years, one of the most popular courses at the RCA. Wow. Obviously, in the last year, things went a bit different. And here we all are at our virtual convocation at the virtual Albert Hall back in July. Excuse me, Mike. Take some liquid. So we've had to do a lot of pivoting recently, but let me just take you on a bit of a journey. And when I got here, I asked the students to describe what they felt service design was, and they came up with this combination of words that I think describes it very well. It's you cannot be a service designer unless you're curious. You have to find out what's really going on in the world, and then you have to be courageous enough to tell the world what's going on and say, this is it. And then we have to work together collaboratively to put things right, whether they're small or big, simple or wicked problems. The behavior of the students is very dynamic. We're looking for innovation. We want to transform. We don't want to leave things alone. And we're very, very human-centered, ridiculously so, but we're also an increasingly planet-centric, and that's probably why I'm here. And there is a tremendous sense of purpose in the work of the students. So if you give me permission, I'll take you on a journey through design and service design, and then I'd love to have some questions and conversations with you. So one of the problems we have with design, and it happened to me last year, almost exactly a year ago, when I spoke at a technology conference, was that when it was announced that Clive GRINYER from the Royal College of Art was getting on stage, everyone left. I didn't take it personally, but what I realized was happening was that why would somebody from an art college come to speak at a technology conference? Why would we come to be speaking at a Replenish and London Climate Action Week? Especially when you Google in famous designers, you get a very long string of fashion designers. So the world has some preconceptions, some perceptions about design, and it's not made any better when you put that into your Messenger app and these little French painters appear. That's not the design I'm talking about. That's not the design we do at service design. But, you know, I'm fascinated by design as a verb. And I often wonder, you know, this could just be a lump of mud. But from the very earliest days of history, we've been interested in creating form and shape to something that's got a very functional requirement, a very functional job to be done. And beyond that, we've painted and decorated. And design has historically been perceived as that, the form giver, the decorator, to give value, to give beauty, to give meaning in our everyday life. And there's nothing wrong with that. And as the industrial age happened, we started mirroring those same values onto more industrially created products. And it was the Industrial Revolution and the Great Exhibition of 1851 that really powered the Royal College of Art into existence, into this amazing area called Albertopolis, with the Science Museum and the Royal College of Music and all the other amazing buildings within a square mile where the Royal College of Art is. But then the last 100 years has been one of reinvention of manufacturing techniques. The Bauhaus famously, you know, came along with a desire to deluxurize design, for it to be for everybody, to use the manufacturing techniques of bicycles to make chairs cheaply and efficiently. Of course, they eventually became the luxury items of a more modern era. But the role of the designer became very important. And people like Raymond Loewy, who made the world's fastest pencil sharpener, train, car, fag packet, you know, logos of the world. Design became about designers. And there's a long history of designers who sort of created iconic products, objects, things that became iconic to us and had meaning in our lives. And not just products, you know, the way we communicate things, our systems of road signage, you know, done by a British designer, Margaret Calvert, has a huge influence on our lives. And I think we can begin to perceive that. And design is visible. And then in recent times, somebody like Johnny comes and does this work with technology. He brings a sense of empathy to technology. He packages it in a more comfortable, human way, which I think has had a massive impact on us. And we've begun to see how design can change things we thought couldn't be changed, which is interesting. And of course, the big change now is that Johnny's work is just a frame. It's just a frame for this new experience we have through the window, through the looking glass, into applications and services. And now we begin to get towards the world of service design. And we become dominated by technology. But so much of technology is thrown at us, and as if it was going to stick to the wall. And I'm celebrating the demise of the Segway because nobody had a use for it. Nobody had asked the question, why do we want one of those things? We didn't, it turned out. We don't want Google Glasses. If I'm sitting in a pub with a friend, I don't want anybody wearing those things, looking at me, recording. And I don't even want Alexa listening to me. And when we hear that Amazon are developing ways of reporting domestic violence, which sounds great, but it means, yes, they are listening all the time, okay? And you realize there are very human things about all these technological solutions that can cause them to fail. And that interests me from a design point of view. And in my life as a product designer, I felt very responsible. My wife always said to me, why have we got these remote controls? It's your fault, Clive. You just want to keep designing all the time. We have a penchant to design everything. So the world gets full of all that. And then we realized there was a sour taste to what we were doing. And Tim Brown, who wrote one of the seminal books on design thinking, started his book with his moment of epiphany when he walked along a beach and saw in the sand a toothbrush that his company had designed. And he felt strangely proud. It wasn't too long after that till a lady called Sophie Thomas, a design environmental activist, took him to task and said, no, that toothbrush sitting on that beach for the next 120 years or whatever is a mark of our failure. It's a mark of our failure to understand the system that we've designed in, because there it is. And suddenly we realize that the impact of all these things we've designed is horrendous. And we come into a different realization and realize we're really part of a system of which we only have a very tiny influence over. And it's that bad outcome from all this design that we thought was so good for the world. It made people like Matthew Taylor, when I first worked with him, and he is chief executive of the Royal Society of Arts, he looked at me and said, designers are the root of all evil. Because in his mind, we were simply creating more and more of the problem. It was the RSA and Sophie Thomas who put in the Great Recovery Program to look at sustainability and circular economy. And she beautifully, in this wonderful video around the Great Recovery, talked about the need to apologize for the idiotic design, the unthoughtful brief, the lack of responsibility to think at the state of production of the whole life of a product. And that's tough to take. And that's probably why I'm a service designer now, not a product designer anymore. Because one of the epiphanies I had as a designer was from my first boss, who incidentally was responsible for the world's first laptop, the grid computer. And his name was Bill Mogridge, one of the founders of the design agency IDEO, which I spent many happy years with. But he said something that made me think differently about design. He said, few people think about it or are aware of it. There is nothing made by human beings that does not involve a design decision somewhere. And what I take from that is that actually we're all culpable, responsible for the decisions, and we're all in a way designers. In some ways it means a CEO or somebody in procurement or a middle manager is making decisions that affects how successful a service or a product is without realizing it, usually unconsciously. But in fact, they are part of this design. Design is not just something done by designers. And we design in the context of commercial decisions, environmental decisions that sometimes we have no control of, but we're still part of that. We're all part of that. And that epiphany was important to me. And it took me into the world of design thinking and the world of service design. So how do I define service design? It's human-centered. It's about behavior. It's about what do people really want? What are their real needs? And how do we change people's behaviors sometimes? It's about this thing called design thinking, which is the application of design methods to intangible services. And it's about the systems. How do we understand systems? How do we use data and culture and operational issues to create new systems to make change? So we're not brave. Sorry, we are brave and we are courageous about taking on big problems and thinking about things. But this is a big area. We're not just talking about the radius on a telephone, which I was when I was a product designer. And we're thinking more about the impact downstream. So it's an approach that puts people's needs at the center of our approach. It's a process that looks carefully at the way people do things to find out what they might really want. And it's then the action of designing systems around people's needs. Increasingly, people's needs, we realize, are becoming the planet's needs. So very early on design thinking and service design, we realized that what we were good at as designers, back to the Greek vase, is desirability. We can add value to the world. We can make people want things. We can make it attractive. Does it fit what people actually want? And that has to be managed in a world of economic viability, the business. Is there a sustainable business model? Can we afford to make something beautiful? And is the technology, the feasibility of manufacturing or technology inside a machine, is that feasible? Is it there? Unless you have that balance, you can't do it. And a lot of the world is good at business viability and good at technology feasibility and very bad at desirability. They don't ask people what they want. And that's why we get these crazy technology push things that have business and technology, but we don't want them. We don't need them, or they've got barriers to their adoption. And that's where service design comes in historically, to try and solve that with design thinking and methodologies. And then we began to develop services. And what was interesting about services 10, 15 years ago was this idea that it was actually very disruptive and that it would change some of the very fundamental stuff, like our sense of ownership. So I'm a great fan of Zipcar. I live in London, where there are lots of Zipcars. You know, this idea that you can go to a car, you can find it on your phone, you can put a card or your application, you can unlock the car and drive it round, park it almost anywhere, and then leave it. And you don't own a phone anymore. And it's a perfect storm of data and smartphones and system thinking. It's everything that I want to communicate about a service. And it even creates the emotional response, which is, I want you to be envious of my service. When I go to a party and I say, well, I have a zip card here and I'm going to Uber back, I can have as much to drink as I want. Thank you very much. When I ever go to a party again. And this creates envy. And envy is a powerful emotional force in ownership of products, ownership of cars, ownership of houses. So services begin to replace products, which is an interesting impact on the environment and society. And it's been very disruptive. We just look at Airbnb. A bunch of designers started Airbnb, took them a few false starts, but they got there in the end. Highly disruptive, using our empty homes, connecting with data and transactions. And of course, Uber, completely revolutionizing. The taxi comes to you, you know, and you can pay for it just by getting out of the cab, out of the car. It's a very different system, complete rethinking. But it's not just those systems. Government digital services have famously completely revitalized and changed the way we do so many boring things in the past. We now don't have to queue to do many things. We can do it online. That's had a massive impact. And our financial systems have been massively improved by digital transformation, but that's been a service transformation as well. So we live in a world that's had about 10 or 15 years of, I still call it invisible impact. You don't see this stuff at the design museum, right? But it's improved our, what we would expect and understand as services like rental cars. But suddenly you find service designers working in a city like Amsterdam to improve security in a highly intensely tourist area. And you think, wow, that's come a long way from being, you know, products and graphics and stuff to suddenly doing services and suddenly doing some really quite interesting social things. And I think that's brought us legitimacy, or so we thought, until all those poster services that we were so proud of, like Airbnb, we forgot to look ahead enough. And suddenly this is Barcelona, the riots in Barcelona in recent years, where the cultural core of Barcelona is hollowed out because of this service, Airbnb, being too successful, you could argue. And Uber in big trouble, you know, how is it looking after its drivers? How is it looking after its passengers? A lot of threats and things we didn't predict. So we love creating the new stuff, you know, and we forget about what happens over time, just like the product designers did. And now we've got some new challenges. We've got AI in our healthcare. How are our healthcare decisions going to be made by artificial intelligence? We already have a justice system that decides who goes to prison or not by AI. And we have our A-level results done by AI. So there are big challenges that are coming at us more and more. And it's what service design is about. And when the course was started 8 years ago by Nick de Leon, and then I'm the new boy in for the year, we did a lot of commercial projects where people were fearful of disruption. We did government, increasingly government and local authority and ministry projects. And then most recently, we began to work in completely new areas like Medicine Sans Frontier, Planathon, a small startup looking at business to business sustainability and replenish actions and vulnerability and financial protection for the poor, the less well off in society. So a tremendous stream of projects. Our most famous project at the RCA is probably In-House Records, which was 2 or 3 years ago, a project for the Ministry of Justice in prisons, working with prisoners who were leaving prison. How could we keep them out of prison? How we could sustain their incomes and their life quality after they left. This was a recording studio in a prison and a record label for when they came out, so they could record. The research showed that many people had musical talent. It was focused and turned into a job. There are now 16 in-house recording studios in prisons in Britain, and a tremendously successful story. And I think storytelling is one of the things we have to use to describe our success. And that is a great story of success that continues to this day. And so in July, we had 70 or so students graduate, and you can see the spread: society and culture, finance, urban healthcare, and of course, climate choice. Climate choice, how are we aware? And I'm going to show you a few examples when I get through. So the thing to know about service design is we're not experts. We don't know the science, right? We work with experts. What we are expert in are the design processes, the facilitation of different conversations, of finding new solutions. We lie a lot. We tell people things are true when they're not, and we see how they react to that. Because we prototype, we don't go and make things until we understand whether they work or not. It's about testing and validating. We steal everything. It's not just design methods. We steal behavioral science. We steal economic modeling. We steal everything we possibly can to make our systems and our ideas work. And we are mostly wrong because we don't sit around saying, is that right? Is that right? We build it and try it. We build it and try it. We learn and do. So we're mostly wrong until at the very end, we're right. And we know we're right because we've proven it. We've looked at all possibilities and we modeled it in prototype. And that's the trick of this design methodology combined with expertise and with real life scenarios. And that's what we do. So what is this thing design? What do I mean by design methods? This is a famous drawing of the design process. Very messy at the start. Eventually you get an idea of where you're going and it comes out. Well, and it's true, it is like that. But at the Design Council 15, 16 years ago, the team that I built up and then went on after I left, developed a very simple model to explain design to people. And it's been very impactful since it was produced. And it talks about discovering what is really going on, looking at research, not just data by all means, but actually talking to people. What is your experience like of this thing? And then you analyze that data and information and you frame the problem you really need to solve. And then you can be very creative, prototype and validate until you know things are right and you can deliver. And it's a diamond because it reflects your framing, your mindset. When are you divergent and you need to accept things? And when do you stop thinking broadly, say now is the time to focus, otherwise we'll just go on forever and explode. So it's a very pragmatic, simplistic. Some say there's 3 diamonds. There's probably 25. It doesn't matter. But the important thing is to think about what you're doing before you go and build it. And this world is full of people who say, oh, I know the answer to that. Give me millions of pounds and I'll solve it for you. And 99% of those projects fail and don't even answer the right problem because they didn't know what the problem was in the first place. And I've seen that through 30 years of life with all those organizations that we heard about. It's a big problem. We need to pause. We need to discover what's going on and ask the problem. And that's what we need to do now with the environment and climate change. We need to find out where the real problems are. And of course, we need to find the solutions led by the insight of what we understand. Now, the parts of the design process that I think I want to share with you is that discovery needs curiosity. You know, we need to find out, most of the time we're looking at people. Who are people? They're old and young. They're abled and disabled, regardless of what you think. That mother's disabled by having a pushchair. That gentleman is disabled by being enabled, I should say. We work in lots of different places. We don't just work in offices anymore. In fact, guess what? We work at home mostly now. And we're not all rich, you know, there's a huge diversity of people. So a lot of what we do looks at people and how they behave. And I've worked with cities in Holland where we looked at old people. And they had never actually bothered to ask old people what they wanted from their services. So we went and researched them. There was a dope dealer. There was a guy on a dating site. There's some people demonstrating for environmental improvements. There's a guy laughing, not dying. There's some people using technology in their community center. And there's a guy with mobility problems. When you make these people real and put them in front of the decision makers, they change. They realize they're doing it for them. and not for some abstract society. And that's an important part of what we do. And then we deep dive. What are people really doing? My favorite story is from the development of Terminal 5 at Heathrow. And they realized that travelers in the future would be older, healthier and wealthier. So they followed them around and saw they all went into the toilets. Weirdly, one of the researchers went into the toilets and found all the older people standing around listening to the announcements. They weren't there to go to the toilet. They were there because they couldn't hear things in the environment of the airport and all the retail and the hubbub. So let's give people a seat. Let's give people enough toilets, of course, but some good signage, some good audio systems so they can actually hear when their flight's called. And I think this desire to get into the toilets of life is fundamental to our approach in service design. We talk about journeys. We talk about what do people really go through, and we go and try and experience the journeys for ourselves. What's going on? What's it like to actually experience? You'd be amazed how many CEOs, you probably won't be amazed, how many CEOs in this world have never experienced the actual services or products that their own companies make. It's incredible. And when you do, it's an epiphany for them. And we map journeys. We look at the before, the during and after. We have journey methods, and journeys are horrendously complicated, all the systems and operations that are going in, but we need to understand these things if we're going to change them. So we use a very simple journey map. How are you aware of something? How do you join it in some way? What's the actual use like? How do you use it more? How do you stay and become loyal? And this could be true of telling somebody about the importance of climate change, about taking pledges. All these things are true. What is that journey we have to take people on? What's the journey we have to take organizations and systems on? And systems are the key word here. You can't change services without understanding the complexity of systems. I love this infographic, if you've ever seen it, of the Alexa AI system that goes into it's amazing, isn't it? Goes into every aspect of the chemicals that are inside it, the data systems and sensors that go to feed it. You can drill down into this forever, but it just reminds you of how complex this world is. And of course, the one thing it doesn't have is what happens to it after use. We always forget to put that bit in. So design has always been interested, and service design more so, with this growing, and this is a well-known graph that looks at, we get stuff out of the ground and then we start producing goods, and so our value goes up, and then around those goods we build services to enhance that experience or the lifetime relationship with it, and then come platforms, things that allow lots of services to work together and enable them, and then becomes transformational, total experience economy, and we see design and service design up in that gray box. So it's actually a lot about economic value. But I think we're beginning to realize that complexity of the system doesn't actually stop there. And so our lovely double diamond, these illustrations come from an RSA, Royal Society of Arts, not the Royal College of Art, publication on the complexity of systems and looking at how design fails, because, we get up, suddenly there's this wall of regulations and procurement, and it's the same for all of us. Whatever we're trying to do when you're affecting change, there's stuff that's blocking, and we need to find these hacks that go through it. So that's what we're really concerned with in service design. How do we find the hacks? But we're also realizing that we're in the middle of a paradigm shift. When we think about systems, we're thinking less about that machine metaphor and more about that ecosystem metaphor, that we're working in soft systems. And there's a reason there's a picture of nature there, because that's how nature's doing it. And that is also such a driver of our ecosystems now. And every designer of a certain age would have read Schumacher, who said any intelligent fool can make things bigger, more complex, more violent. It takes a touch of genius and a lot of courage to move in the opposite direction. And that feels to me like where we are now. And Tim Brown said, this last 100 years, we've raced for efficiency. It's left us vulnerable to disruption from technology, sustainability, and globalization. We're kind of slightly lost, to which some other idiot said systems can become barriers or enablers to change. Our design decisions have to be managed at a systemic level. That was me, because we want to change a system. There's no point just imagining stuff. So a few more slides just to get through my rant on what service design is. The other tools we have, which I think are very useful, and I hope are useful to this world we're talking about today, is ideas. But ideas are not mystical things that come from mountaintops. They're hard won hard-working things that come from collaboration, working together, sharing lots and lots of ideas to see where we go. We have lots of techniques up our sleeves about supercharging our ability to be creative, because we might only want one idea in the end, but you need to have thousands of ideas to find the good one. And I think it's where so many people go wrong. People have an idea and stick with it. They're so pleased they've had an idea. We need to have lots of ideas if we're going to solve this world crisis that we're in. And we have to collaborate. Design is a very collaborative thing. We put lots of different people in the room and get them to work it out. It makes life fun. It inspires people, gets them away from their work. But if you're going to solve problems, you've got to focus and put people in a room, literally lock them in a room, turn off that email, think about the one problem, and then you become very creative very quickly. And the other aspect of design is we prototype stuff very quickly. We try it out. It's this lying, as I called. It's very easy to do in digital. We increasingly do it in physical. And I think we're going to be doing it in systems. How do we prototype different systems? What are the outcomes of things? But the point is, you can do this very simply. You don't have to build the system. You can understand how things change with bits of cardboard box, Lego, and various other tools that are vital to prototyping in our world. And at the end of that, you get stories, and stories are powerful. When G8 turn up in Paris to talk about climate change, that lump of glacial ice tells a story that's very powerful. And in service design, we don't have chairs, we don't have fashion, we just have stories, and we have to tell stories. And these are stories about changing people in different parts of the world, improving their prospects. And this is a story. This is a story of a washing machine, an environmentally sustainable washing machine. There you put your clothes into the buckets of water and you leave them there for a week. And the plants diffuse that water, they filter the water and clean your clothes in a week. There's no detergent, there's no power. It's a very powerful story. It's an incredible product, and people go, wow, that's really interesting. And we can ask people questions like, well, you know, your shirt might not smell quite as nice, but it will be clean. Promise. And maybe it won't be quite so white, you know, maybe you have to a little bit off color, but it will be clean and it will be good. You know, no power, no detergent. People go, wow, that's crazy, but it takes a week. And you say, yes, but we've done the research, and the average length of time from you taking your clothes off and putting it into the, getting it out again clean is a week. You know, it sits in the laundry basket a week anyway. So there's no difference. And then you say to people, it's a fake. It's a complete fake. And I love that. We're lying to people again, but we had you going, you know, you believed it because you could.
I actually thought that this was a washing machine. No, I really, really did.
I'm impressed. I'm impressed. So these stories that we can tell, I think, are as close as we can get to a crystal ball, but they're also very provocative, you know. And there's this whole aspect of design called speculative design, where we look this sort of cone of the future, 5, 10, 25 years. And you say, well, what's possible, what's plausible, and what's probable? And then we got to make some decisions, what's preferable. And for me, I think this is one of the most powerful design tools there is, actually, especially now when we're talking about climate action. It's our time to look ahead, because when you look ahead, you look at the signals, you paint some scenarios, you speculate massively into the future, you look at the implications, and you come back and you put that into your strategy tomorrow, literally tomorrow. So this is a way of thinking of the future and coming back and doing right now what needs to be done. I think it's a very powerful tool, and increasingly becoming so. You know, here, for example, is the government doing speculative design on the high street. This is a couple of people looking at a faked up high street store that repairs your domestic robots in 25 years time. And you think, okay, why are we doing that for? But it's getting people ready. It's helping people have a conversation about what is that going to be like. It's the same as the washing machine. It's faking it till you know what to make, which I think is a really fascinating aspect of design. So very quickly, a couple of examples from our graduates recently. Last July, we had Rosa Blouse, who felt so passionate about climate. She wanted to put content on climate change into every topic, every subject curriculum in every university in the UK and beyond. And she worked first of all with Imperial next door, then she worked with Cambridge, and she worked with Westminster, and she worked with Delft, and she worked with these colleges, and they found out how to put content not just into engineering and science and physics, but into English and history, into the humanities, to provide content so that every single person who was teaching university had some content on climate change to teach, because she felt so strongly that every student should know this stuff. I thought it was a fantastically simple, beautiful project that is gaining momentum as we speak. Another project looked at the fashion supply chain and asked, how can we get sustainability and transparency into the garment production industry without it costing the earth in every sense, and to help the industry be environmentally conscious? And what was great about this project, what was clever, was that it sort of forced the key players to do it, so that all their other supply chain had to coalesce to that and had to come along as well on that journey. And so it's about that behavior change thing again, the other thing we steal around behavioral science. This project Orbit looked at, for Planathon, it looked at taking the science, taking the knowledge of natural materials into other businesses, B2B replenishing, using, in this case, orange peel to make handbags. And they were showing how you could create the information exchange to help businesses understand there were different solutions than going back to petrochemicals and terrible things. And right now we're working on a project with Aalto University, looking at how the community, the town community and the university combine to understand nature, to look at the nature around them. And I think this, for me, is the sort of head of an iceberg that is about our changing opinion of nature and beginning to use all the things I'm talking to you about, this, from creativity to discovery to changing behavior, to work out how to do it. And I think now we're in the time where increasingly I'm talking about transformation, where this model is sort of being replaced. We're looking at, so how can we understand how to change economics to be replenishment? How can we look at not just feasibility, but real systems, social and economic transformation? And how can we bring the human side of action, human-led action, to make this change? And I talk a lot about design for truth. Where's the data that everyone understands? It seems to be in peril at the moment, truth. How does data and measurement help people understand that we have to make some big decisions? So maybe we are on the cusp of reinventing these models that we've been using for 15, 20 years in service design. We need to think differently. And maybe the double diamond needs to go from what it was before to discover, what can we do? What are the barriers we need to change? What's our battle cry? And how do we collaborate to reach this new objective? And how do we change the system to run under new rules, the rules of replenishment? We like to say on this course, what's the problem or need you're really trying to solve? What are the systems involved? What does current reality look like? How can we transform this system? We need to solve problems that need solving. And don't just imagine them, but deliver it. And as my favorite saying in the whole world goes, it's from a strange source, but Che Guevara said, be a realist, demand the impossible, because you've got to imagine that and take us there. So many things in this last century were impossible. They've happened. We need to demand the impossible to make sure we get there. So thank you very much for listening to my rant. And I'll stop. I don't know. Are you going to stop sharing? Or am I going to stop sharing?
I'm just so impressed. I think we should keep it on there for a second so people have a moment to take the details down and send these emails to you, because I can only imagine there are 1,000 questions that are in the minds of our audience. Because if and please do, audience, send your messages in, send your comments and your questions in so that we can ask Clive. And it gives us a little bit of time to go through some thoughts that we've been having. And I think when we were initially sort of conversing about, where does service design play a role? For us, it's intuitively the magic, DNA across everything that we have touch points with. And it's so tough to almost imagine that there is a study of, where it's almost like the mycelial network, right? You don't see it, but it's everywhere. It's under everyone's, feet, basically. So service design is, for us, something that really has these amazing touch points. And, when it comes to climate action, and of course, as you've identified, one of the things that was coming up was human-centric versus planet-centric. We've gone from product-centric to, we've gone from sort of product-centric to service-centric. We're sort of moving away from owning things to having the experience of things. And then, the beautiful thing that I picked up was how everybody is a designer, because everybody designs the choices that they have consequences in their own lives. So it's a massive feedback loop from what how you design your life and how that then allows us to sort of catalyze that change. So big question to the audience is, what are the accelerators or catalysts for change when it comes to service design? And a question that I've got for you, and I've got many, but just to start us off, is how do you think service design can contribute to climate action? I think you've already highlighted some very key areas where people are transitioning. Service design is transitioning from product to planet-centric capabilities and services that go beyond just like this crazy Uber ownership or shared ownership model, especially when it comes to the decentralization of those, services. So yeah, I'd love to hear some of your thoughts on, really kind of tackling the sort of climate action element of it, because I think we're moving to that stage where we want to make change, but sometimes it's difficult to know exactly how.
Brilliant question. Thank you. I think historically, as I've shown you, we have been human-centric, and there's been a reason for that, because despite everything, every organization I've worked for claims it's customer-centric, but the customer is never really in there. Mm-hmm. So we've spent a lot of time just trying to get organizations to think about people. But now the agenda is changing, and it's very exciting for us that our target is changing. It is planet-centric, and we have to stand back, and we have to have some humility. We're no longer the designers who were magicians and wizards who would just say, do it like this. We're facilitators, and more than that, we're leaders. But I think the parts of what we do that are, I believe, going to be important are the behavior changing parts. How can we change the behavior of systems, of leaders, of economic thinking, of businesses? How can we lead consumers to understand these things are important? We're more used to working with consumers, but to deliver something that is people-centric, we had to embrace business and systems and operational aspects. So we know about how to get under the hood and try and make things different. It's meant to be what we're good at. But previously, for the benefit of people to have stuff that just worked. Now the target has changed. So it's about refocusing the skills I believe we do have. And it's about that collaboration. I think ultimately the purpose of service design is to create that vision, that middle thing in the middle of the double diamond. It's the reason I call it a battle cry. If we bring everybody around, if we bring the evidence and to a place where we say, this is the problem we must solve. And now we will collaborate on creativity, and we will create something that will really have an impact and work. And it feels like this is now the time to have the ideas, to visualize what replenish means and looks like, so people actually know what to do. I've always been fascinated with science fiction, how it brought the future to people, so that when a mobile phone turned up, it looked like it was on Star Trek. When Minority Report was made 20 years ago, we still are, looking for that future. I think if we can envision the future of replenish and what that means, people can travel down that road more easily. So that was a long answer to your question, but I hope I've explained.
Totally. I kind of, one of the things that we've been looking at Replenish Earth is ecofuturism, as in answering those questions. How can we give people the minimum viable shock, where we give them the opportunity to experience something that doesn't yet exist? So coming back to your washing machine, right? Like giving them the opportunity to see the potential for something existing, even though it doesn't. And so the experience is almost as if, that it gives you an opportunity to see that this could be real. And if it is real, then what does that mean for the decision-making process of designing a reality for it? So coming back to, the wand, right? Like the wand that can tell you, what's happening in your life, like a Star Trek sort of discovery type of wand. And then you're looking at the person and you're saying, right, like your vital stats are da, 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 da. But imagine if you could give people the opportunity of doing that today. And, a couple of years ago, there was an opportunity for scientists, technologists to come together and actually try to design something that could interact with the human body. I mean, the fact that something could touch your body like an iPhone or an Apple Watch and tell you what your heart rate is sort of already at that quantified self measure. But the ecofuturism is giving you the experience of potential futures that could be a reality. Part of the challenge we feel is that people are lacking the opportunity to see that into being, right? Because it's not real right now. So how can you believe in something that you don't see, feel, smell, touch?
Yeah. And I think there's another aspect. I think what you've described is very true there, but I think we tend to think that it's the scientist's job to think of the future. And I think also futurism tends to be a very individual thing. I think what we say is that the future is built on the now. It's a collaboration of technology, science, and human and art. That's why I'm at the RCA, but I'm not a painter and a sculptor. I'm embracing technology. Everybody at Service Design is about that. But it's also a future we need to collaborate on together. I think that's really much more important than just having an individual visionary. And then we backcast. We backcast to say, okay, now we know what we're going to do. Now, what are the things we do now to get to there? And I think we've got the facilitation tools to make that happen. But we need to have that. You know, in the moment post-COVID, everything's very science. That's right. We need a vaccine. That's science. But track and trace is terrible. You know, so you need the two together. You need a vaccine, you need to know who's got it, and suddenly you realize only having a scientific viewpoint, only having individual leaders falls down, in our opinion.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we're definitely experiencing is that that communities are so used to having this experience of shaming and guilt tripping that you evil person, you've been doing XYZ. So how can service design change that experience of climate shaming and driving that level of guilt to one of encouragement, of beyond that sort of you are to blame, but you are empowered?
That's a deep question.
And that's a tough question, I think. And this is the reason why, you know, whenever we talk about sustainability, we look at the sort of the WEF images of things rotting and things burning, and WWF images of things, you know, falling apart, and rightly so, you know, the waves of rubbish, right? Like there was this Twitter video that went viral with just a wave coming in. It was just all rubbish, and you're looking at it thinking,
I remember.
This is real. Ew.
So I mean, I think it's been, you know, well chronicled that the examples of shaming, you know, have kind of implied that, you know, if I don't throw away a plastic bag, then the whole world is saved, or it's all like our fault. I think we, from our perspective, see that it's the system that does need changing, but at the same time, we all want to feel we can have a role in that. One of the amazing things during my life is how societal behavior has changed. And there was a time 20 years ago when I went on a very early fact-finding mission to Japan, looking at recycling of products, you know, design for dismantling, that sort of first wave of sustainability, and reusing the materials. And, you know, talking to UK manufacturers 20 years ago and saying, by the way, guys, this is coming. And if you're making parts for Sony or Panasonic, they're going to want you to recycle. Completely dismissed it and said, but the consumers will never care. Turns out they do care, and it's been successful, you know. And so I think you can build social force, and we have done quite successfully, but we still come down to this thing of we need to show people actions that will work, and we need to show where pressure needs to be put, and we need to show where the system needs to change, and we need to give people a viable action plan. And one of the things I love about design, again, it was Tim Brown who unfortunately had the toothbrush on the beach, but he came and spoke to our students recently, and I said, what do you feel is the fundamental thing about design? He said it's a bias to action. You know, if there's an empty page, we want to fill it, and we don't just want to criticize something or say something's terrible. We want to find the positive journey out of that. And I think that spirit can be shared. So I think one of the answers is that we need to start create the actions that people can actually do rather than just be shamed by. I think everyone's looking for that. They want to know what those actions are.
Yeah, and that's what makes it so much fun, because we
Yes.
get to sort of explore that. One of the things that was really coming up even in our team at Replenish Earth was, what would be your advice to the young thinkers and dreamers? How would you advise them to approach the future? I mean, there's two questions there, but
yes. So when people ask me what advice would I have given myself, that kind of question, I always say, you were right 20, 30 years ago. And so that's definitely one thing to say, you are right. And the other thing is to say, I don't mean to scare you, but there is a sense of responsibility in young people, and people are dreaming. The world actually needs you to use your creativity to help us solve this thing. The world has been let down in so many ways, and again, we can't always blame ourselves. We didn't have future crystal balls. We didn't realize the actions we were taking were going to have such an impact. But we have to learn now that we do need to think about that. And it is down onto our young thinkers, our young dreamers, our entrepreneurs, our scientists, our creatives, because we need you to take that responsibility. And maybe one of the weird things about this crazy pandemic world we're sort of out of is that we will refresh and we will rethink about what we need to do. And we will perhaps jump off the hamster wheel of life a bit more often and say, you know what, I'm going to try and use my position to do something good. And if I had my time again, I would have been much more courageous and much braver. So please be courageous on my behalf for the future. That would be my advice to you.
It's almost as if, what's the biggest that you can think, right? And what's the biggest that you can develop? Because I think that creation, for me, when somebody asks me what does success look like, for me, it's at 100% of my creative ability. That for me is success. It's not having more things or, traveling to more countries. Of course, that's lovely. But, the ability to really transform something from just the way that I thought about it, right? That something that that inspired me and then was created through my hands or my thoughts or my actions. And I think that is the ultimate power that we have. And when you combine that, it kind of brings me back to a post that I wrote on Medium, something along the lines of, how do you actualize a community, which is effectively where we are today, with a population of people wanting to know, well, yeah, we get that climate action is necessary, but where do we even begin? It's that, how do you actualize a community of people? Yeah. So it's less about like, oh, yes, we're at warfare at the bottom, right? Like militarization never really leads to, peaceful talks, right? Like if I pick up an arm, then you're going to have to pick up an arm because you think that I'm going to attack you. Whereas, and that has been used through economics and business and all sorts of other, experiences in our lives. And so how do we step away from that and recognize that we have in us the ability to create peace just as much as we have the ability to create war? And I think this is the opportunity to shift the debate, the dialogue, right, to dialectics, finding the truth in things, finding the truths across all of our perspectives, not just, one is better than the other, but, this sort of, hey, we've all got perspectives, whether we come from this culture or this tradition, this country, this city, this community. And I think that is where collaboration really comes forward.
Thank you. I enjoyed your words there very much, but it also made me think about leadership. And there's two sides to leadership. One is the attitude of leaders, and the other is the attitude of those being led. And one of the things I've sort of noticed a lot in life is, I think leadership is about empowerment. And if you have an idea, share it and make it better by sharing it and empower others to act on your ideas. We tend to think that leaders are just there to make the big decisions. I don't think they are. I think they're there to empower and be the force field for everyone else. And the same thing for people who are being led. Don't wait to be told. Understand that leaders are there to be demanded of and should be empowering, enabling you to see your ideas through. And I think people who have ideas, people who dream, need to realize they have to share it. They have to collaborate it. It's not about a single path where you must defend all commas. You know, we have so many myths, from Alan Sugar to Richard Branson to Donald Trump, you know. Turns out it wasn't all them. It was a lot of other people, and you need to share and you need to collaborate to get real success and lead people, everybody, to success. And I think some fresher thinking about leadership will get us further.
How much of creativity do you feel is about permission?
Well, that's a terrific word, actually. So, you know, I would say a huge amount. And it's one of the reasons I talk about design being responsibility for everybody, because I realized that, you know, quite selfishly, my creativity when I was a product designer, I couldn't put a radius on something unless somebody had made an economic decision that I could use a manufacturing process so I could put a nice shape on it. Very selfish. But I realized I was part of a system. I was part of a set of decision making. And so if you, as a designer, one of the faults of design, I think, is that so many designers wait for the brief. They wait for permission. I think it's time to give yourself permission and get out there and do it. And that for me is the big lesson. And I'd say to my service design students, you know, nobody ever wakes up in the morning, or not that often, and says, I need a service designer. We have to use Trojan horse methodologies, you know. I've never had a job that was called service design until I got this one. I got in by any other means. And then I didn't wait around for permission because I knew they wouldn't know what was needed. So I did it, and I did my experiments, and it worked, and it resonated, and we got to be successful. And that is kind of how you have to work with the world, you know. You can't wait around for permission.
And I think that's so powerful when you marry that with the sort of the potential for all of these futures. Like, we look at moonshots, retrocasting, recognizing that the future that we're about to live is the work and seeding of those of the past, that we are living their legacy. And so, you know, in many of the opportunities that I do get, I always remember to say that that legacy doesn't have to be yours. That is not your burden to continue. That is not your, you know, issue. If you want to break away from that, that's absolutely fine. You have full permission to do so. Like, just because systems were designed in a particular way, or governance was designed in a particular way, that doesn't mean that it has to continue like that. And I think one of the things about permission is knowing that you can break the system, disrupt it, come up with something different, and run with it, and have the courage, as you said, to try and do that.
It's sort of why there are lots of startups at the world. There was that great quote, I nearly put it in my presentation. It's something along the lines of, the present is a result of the accidents of previous decisions, kind of thing. You know, that is what it is, isn't it? And then everyone defends them like crazy. And then one of my least favorite sayings, when I'm in a sort of situation where things are really bad, people say, yeah, but it used to be worse. That is not good enough. I don't care if it used to be worse. It needs to be better.
It's so powerful when you can kind of recognize that these are the accidents of the past, right? Like, these are the trials and the errors and the, you know, the let's prototype this could work. And I think that kind of experimentation in life gives us the opportunity and the permission to be able to fall up instead of falling down.
Fall up. I like that. Yes.
You know, the sort of methodology that you're never really going to fall down. You know, like imagine if my niece, who is a year and a half, every time she fell down, she was just like, you know what, that's it. I'm just not going to get up. You know, learning how to walk fundamentally is learning how to fall down well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, completely agree. And that's why I say we're always wrong, because what we teach is to fail, you know, because then when you fail, you know what's wrong, and then you know what's good. And again, this sort of world we live in, where people protect their ideas and invest more and more, and then they finally launch them and they find out they're terrible and they don't work. And I can't believe how many times that's happened in my life, you know. So I know fail early is a much used expression, but it's so much better to fail early and learn. And I encourage my students to stop thinking and start doing. Sounds crude, but as long as no one's hurt, it's okay, you know. And it's much better than delivering something, turning the button on, and then finding out that there's a terrible impact. Yeah, fall over lots, you know, before you run a marathon.
That's the thing about, like, the design process, which I admire so much. which kind of relates to essay writing, right? You spend most of your time planning what you're going to write and the least amount possible to actually write the damn thing. But at the beginning, you're getting all your thoughts down, you've got the strategy and you've got your plan of what you need to get in there. And I think this sort of process of focusing is something that is real hard work, especially when it comes to focusing on, another idea. Okay, well, what's the best idea that you can get after that and after that and after that? And it's a tough process, and it's a really challenging process to work through, because you're really pushing that muscle of focusing on an ideation process that, that works against any of this attention economy of like 2 seconds and then you're done, next picture.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's a couple of things there that we encourage people to do as well. I mean, one is you have to sometimes let go of your ideas, sometimes they're not good. But the other thing is to say, what is the problem you're trying to solve? We have this exercise of 5 whys. It's like a child, if you say an idea to a child and they say, well, why? And you give an answer and they'll say, why? And that is such a great discipline, to put your idea, to put your thinking through, always go down through those 5 whys. And ask yourself, am I solving the problem? And then the other aspect is knowing when you're solving the problem. If you were to do this, how would you know you had succeeded? And again, people don't do that until the end of the process. I think it's something you should do almost as soon as you know what the problem is you're going to solve. So, well, how will we know when we solved it? And that's a way of measuring all your other ideas and actions. You can always go back and say, was this a good idea? Because it's going to deliver that signal that will deliver that outcome. Or won't it? And if it doesn't, don't do it.
That's basically where we're taking your inspiration at Replenish Earth, which is, what do we want to see? We want to see the Earth replenished. And when we will know we've been successful, when it is replenished, and when we have these sorts of metrics that we can look at and say, I think we did a good job. I think it comes back to that opportunity of being courageous, taking service design, understanding where people can take their own permission, taking ownership of their decisions, which is a design process, even if it is a daily occurrence for themselves, and understanding that, we all have a part to play in mobilizing in terms of climate action. It is a very personal, opportunity, a personal activity, which we can really create a lot of momentum if we work together. So Clive, thank you very, very much for your time and for sharing your thoughts. And I think everyone's going to be chewing on this for a while, especially at our team, on how we can work closer with the RCA and your mission, and to be of support wherever we can.
Thank you for asking me. It's been a real honor to talk to your audience and to you. Really enjoyed it. And it's changed my thinking as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Clive. Take care.